This article is titled Closing the Gap, the Effect of a Targeted Tuition-Free Promise on College Choices of High-Achieving Low-Income Students, and the authors are Susan Donarski, C.J. Labasi, Catherine Mitchell-Moore, Stephanie Owen, and once again, the website is nber.org. Don't want to get copyright claims and for purposes of no plagiarism, things like that. Hi everyone, my name is Jason Collin, and today I'll be talking about an article titled Closing the Gap, the Effect of a Targeted Tuition-Free Promise on College Choices of High-Achieving Low-Income Students. And I chose this article because I wanted to see the connection between economics and higher education, and obviously this kind of spoke to me a little bit because obviously I know was like, have the pressure having of college tuition and how much it could be a burden, especially for students that are of a lower income than even I am. And yeah, that's why I chose it. And I wanted to start this off by giving a little summary of which essentially the article shows research of a place called Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I believe the college chosen to do this experiment, if you want to call it, was Michigan State University or Michigan University, in which I believe 2,000 something students were like a group of 2,000 students, and of those that were low income, they gave free full ride scholarships, based for like 4 years, and they would send them packets so that they could enroll, one to the students that had login information, then they would send packets to the parents, notifying them of what the students did. And obviously there was research showing that enrollment and application rates doubled from what they previously were of students normally, not having the scholarship. And we see that it's doing great for these students, as it can have a far greater effect for the future. And obviously the offer of the scholarship doubled the rates of increased application enrollment rates, because it went from what they normally would have been at, which was 26%, to 68%, and for increased application and for enrollment, it went from 12 to 27%. And now we're just seeing how this is helping low-income students, because there's obviously the barrier of money is a huge thing that they have to overcome. And I can see how this could connect to topics that I have been learning about in my economics class, such as scarcity, and how there's like a lack of access or the ability to go to college because of this barrier, such as money. And since they're low income, there's obviously other barriers, but really essentially money, scarcity, the lack of access or the ability to go to college. It's not there for them. They can't go. And obviously, this scholarship could be a way to offset that. And going back to scarcity, how it's a lack of access or the ability to go there. The article talked about in the experiment how there were different control groups, or at least different groups, like one control group and then the treatment group. The treatment group is the one that received the offer of the scholarship, and the control one, they're just regular. And the article also mentions how this differs, because in, I believe, more suburban or was Black and Hispanic students, as they had like different areas to go from. And I think the rural areas were more white, so obviously different backgrounds, so different socioeconomic variables going on here. And going back to scarcity of how some have access and the others don't. And obviously that one area with the Black and Hispanic students, or at least areas, the scarcity there is way more from what I've seem to understand. And the equation, the economic model they use was y based JT equals BO plus B1 plus B2 S based JT plus U based JT. Um, the economic model I described, the y-based JT, et cetera, et cetera. The point of that economic model is to just see what the students will do with the scholarship being given, to see the outcome of whether students take advantage of that, among other things. The economic model also could vary depending on whether you're in the treatment or the control group, and that affects what the outcome could be. As for what could be done more or what could be built upon what's already been done, I think trying out different scholarships, maybe, or maybe different places, in different like economic situations, such as maybe a different states, such as maybe California or good old Ohio. Obviously, and as in for different scholarships, maybe like a 50% or a 75% type scholarship could be tried, because obviously something like full ride for a lot of students, as good as that is a burden that could be put on like taxpayers. So maybe something not always full ride, could lessen the burden, and sorry, could end up being better overall instead of just full ride. And as for policies that can be made, maybe just, maybe, no, just lower tuition rates. That could be something that could be done. The name of the scholarship given was called Hail, and the information and data gathered from that was to see if the students went to the website, to get more information and to log in and to see how many times it was visited and who went further in the stage, to do what needed to be done for the scholarship. And as I mentioned before, there were like two packets that were received: one for the student with the login information, and the other for the parents, notifying them of stuff sent to the student, or I guess in this case their child. And what was noted is that sometimes once the package was sent to the parent to notify them, there was a spike for the student. There was a spike in the traffic going into the website so that the students could do the work for the application. I should also mention that this was done between two cohorts, which explains the percentage that I talked about earlier: the 68 versus 26, the 27 versus the 12%, the admission and acceptance rates. And this was done between two cohorts. The lower percentage being the control, and then the higher ones are obviously the treatment, the scholarships given. And this is showing how helpful this scholarships are. And I should mention also that it was the University of Michigan that this was done at. The University of Michigan that the school chosen for was, and how they also noted that they technically didn't look at the effect of the treatment that they gave, but rather the comparison of like the admission rates, the difference between both. I should also mention back to how they're targeting low income, high achieving students to determine what was low income for them. Some of the ways they would check would be if, obviously there's varying levels of low income or economic situations, and they would look by way of who receives free lunch or at least reduced price in certain ways, or look at the poverty line in that area. And obviously that also means different levels of full ride of how much they can pay, and I'm assuming that's what they did based on what I think of what I've seen so far in this article. And when it came to the high achieving part of the students, obviously they were looking at SAT scores and GPA, just to further solidify things. And once again, as I said, since there's like varying levels of the economic situations, especially since it's low income, They've even mentioned that they needed larger treatment based on the level of their low income. And so obviously this also goes back to what I'm saying of how that could be a burden because not everyone's at the same level in since it's low income, that's a lot of money that's being given. So obviously, sorry again, they could try out different scholarships once more, or see what can be done, just to get things moving, or maybe once again somehow drop the tuition rates. That's just something that could be done. I did mention that other schools could try and do what was being done for the University of Michigan, and I recently remembered that I had this talk with like one of these academic peer coaches, people, and she sent me a link talking about how OSU had something similar. OSU and Michigan rivalry, still doing the same things, competing with each other, but it was called the Scarlet and Gray Advantage, and from what she explained to me, she sent me a link. It seems to be something similar that OSU is doing to what was happening in my article, and so maybe that's also something schools can do, and maybe instead of maybe big schools that have that much, that have higher tuition, maybe free college or at least a full ride for maybe one of the how should I say, lower schools. Not that there's anything wrong with them. More like community college schools, because like the community colleges or like not as big schools in Ohio, that from what I heard, they have good things, or maybe even different colleges. They don't have to be colleges where you have to get degrees, maybe like trade schools and get certifications, because that would also help bring more people into those type of forces, instead of only big schools. So that could also be something, and that can also be a future benefit. Not to mention the return on investment on that could be really good. And I'm also kind of remembering that as I had a talk with someone from the writer studio, and we talking about this idea, not just only big schools, maybe trade schools, community colleges, so so the return on investment later on down the line, and especially for now, it could really pay off. And since it's also not at as big schools, the burden isn't as heavy. So yeah, those are really great potential things happening there. That could be a possibility.